The headlines on RT International. Ultra-left activists attempt to disrupt an event by a conservative speaker, sparking scuffles just outside New York University.
This election has proven how divided we are.
And we look at the other side of America that's not out protesting to see why working people supported Donald Trump, despite all the liberal fury directed against him now.
People in the more dangerous parts of the city are being evacuated from their homes in armored personnel carriers because it is unsafe to leave by foot or by car.
3 days of shelling of the city of Donetsk by Ukrainian forces claims civilian lives and the most dangerous military escalation in months. And it's revealed a London mosque was refused service from major banks for years after news agency Reuters mistakenly put it on a global terror database. Just turning midday on Friday here in Moscow. Thanks for joining us. It's RT International. Scuffles erupted outside New York University, where prominent Trump supporter and co-founder of Vice Media, Gavin McInnes, was speaking. The protesters attempted to prevent people from attending the event, in some cases by attacking them. One of those who was attacked was wearing a Make America Great Again hat, which was later stolen and burned. Several arrests were also made. Now, it all echoes the violence which was seen at a campus in California on Thursday, when the editor of the news website Breitbart and a leading Trump supporter had to cancel his speech at Berkeley University. Rioters smashed property and hurled stones at police. Now, the university said it condemned the riots, adding that it regretted the fact that a peaceful protest had been hijacked. And political activist Scott Presler says liberal protests are increasingly being taken over by the extreme left.
I'm not surprised what we're seeing at the UC Berkeley campus. Violence is something that has been a big part of what we've seen from the Clinton campaign. They have been throwing eggs at us. They have been beating us. They've been attacking us. This is something that we've seen ever since Mr. Trump announced his candidacy. It was very evident that there were groups of media that were telling the entire world that this race was locked in for Hillary Clinton. So yes, to many people who followed those news sources, this was a shock. If you are unhappy with your government, there are ways to take back control that don't include pepper spraying people in the face, destroying property, and punching people. There are better ways to achieve what you want in the world without violence.
The violent protests seen across America could give the impression that the country is at war with its new president, Donald Trump. But of course, they really only give half the picture of what is in fact a deeply divided country. RT correspondent Caleb Mopan went to Ohio, a state known as Clinton country, to find out why, despite the name, people there voted for Trump.
Jobs. Jobs, jobs.
Trying to get people back to work, that was the big thing.
I think was jobs for leaving our country.
The agenda of anti-Trump protesters who insist that their values are under threat doesn't really fly out here in Ohio, a place plagued by unemployment and failing infrastructure.
Can you tell us why it is that people in this area voted so strongly for Donald Trump?
I think it was because they liked what he said and what he had to do. And he's kind of proving it right now with all the stuff he's been doing.
I think he's going to turn out to be one of the best presidents we've ever had.
It's improving. It was a big blow to Clinton County when DHL left.
But I think that's improving, going to be improving.
Something about Trump's personality seems to really click with people in this part of America and other regions like it. Now, that's clearly not the case in New York and the West Coast. outcry about Trump's recent executive order on immigration seemed to make the stance of U.S. voters pretty clear, except it didn't. Public opinion polls show that a majority of Americans actually favor Trump's travel restrictions. Back in Manhattan, we decided to show people some of the opinions that we recorded in the Trump Belt about the protests which erupted and started during Trump's inauguration. People and their negative opinion of the protesters.
I mean, to me, I feel like protest is a perfectly legitimate way of expressing political beliefs.
Well, let me ask you, we went to Ohio and we interviewed some Trump supporters about all the protests that have been happening, and this is what they told us, and we want you to kind of react to what they said. Is that okay? Sure. Thank you so much.
Now, all these people rioting in the cities after Trump won, breaking windows, protesting and stuff like that, do you think that they're in touch with reality?
They're just young people looking for trouble. That's all they are.
Like their rights are going to be taken away?
Yeah.
Well, how would they know? He's just beginning to govern.
So what do you want to say to those people?
I don't believe they know America. This election has proven how divided we are, and to me, this is not the way you get peace.
A lot of this country is very racist, and a lot of that comes from fear of the unknown, and maybe they're not educated enough.
When you have a population of people that only receive a certain amount of information and you don't teach people that they have to broaden their resources to then make an opinion, it's understandable where some people can form what kind of side they would be on.
I think that the only way, like what Catherine said, is that those people need to be educated better.
Trump, just like Richard Nixon in the past, talked about a silent majority that just wasn't being listened to. But now that Trump is in the White House, their voices still aren't being heard. Perhaps the problem, though, is that the other side just doesn't want to listen. Caleb Maupin, RT, New York.
Meantime, Iraqi families tried to take advantage of the criticism over Washington's restrictions on foreigners traveling to America by blaming President Trump.
I really, really believe this in my heart. If they would have let us in, my mom, she would have made it, and she would have been sitting right here next to me. She's gone because of him.
That claim was aired on Fox News and sparked widespread headlines. However, it was later revealed the man was lying and his mother had passed away before the Trump travel restrictions came into effect. The confirmation actually came from an imam close to that family, and he spoke with us.
I know their family very well, and I know their mother has died around 22nd because the community held here a funeral home for 24 and 23rd. The banning law of Mr. Trump came, I believe, after the death of the lady. Well, unfortunately, some of the media are extreme and they're looking for a catch so they can blame President Trump. I think this banning law, the immigration law of Mr. Trump, has two sides. It's meant to prevent terrorists from coming to this country. That's good. And I still remember his statement before the election, and this is why I voted for him. And the bad side of the law, we have trouble in Iraq. Terrorists coming from north of Iraq, from Turkey, and south of Iraq, from Saudi Arabia. So he discluded, unfortunately, Mr. Trump, discluded Turkey and Saudi Arabia.
However, it's not the first time Donald Trump has been blamed for the death of a relative. For example, the following story involving a Yemeni refugee was aired on CNN.
My dad passed away because we didn't have any medicine back then in Yemen because of the siege.
Sorry.
And my mom is now recently living in a destroyed house because of the airstrikes.
Your family is suffering because our president is reckless, and his administration is incompetent.
However, both the girl and Pelosi failed to mention that the Yemeni crisis was escalated when Obama was the president. The U.S. was strongly and continues to strongly support their Saudi allies in the fight against Yemeni rebels, as well as supplying Riyadh with billions of dollars worth of weapons for its military campaigns. In fact, in the past 8 years, under Obama, 42 separate deals were either proposed to or made with Saudi Arabia, totaling $150 billion. Now, the rift between Donald Trump and the media is growing ever deeper, with news outlets even devising new rules for how to cover the president. Miguel Francis Santiago takes a look.
How long does it take for a global superpower to plunge down among the ranks of countries like Zimbabwe or Yemen? Apparently about 12 days, according to Reuters editor-in-chief Steve Adler. The agency's official guide on how to report all things Trump perhaps was supposed to be an inspiring piece, but instead it painted a pretty grim picture for America's next 4 years at least. It brags about the fact that Reuters has all skills necessary to counter the threat of Trump's America. All because it dealt with legal prosecution, visa restrictions, and even physical threats in, such desperate places like Zimbabwe, Iraq, Yemen, and of course, Russia. So what are those skills Reuters asks journalists to utilize? Well, stay out of trouble, stay calm, and gather all your emergency resources. But what led Mr. Adler to such frustration? Well, Trump is not a big fan of mainstream media.
Don't be rude. No, I'm not going to give you a question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you stay categorical?
You are fake news.
Now, see, Reuters has a problem with this. After all, the guide also points out that Trump called the MSM among the most dishonest human beings on earth, mainly because of this.
Liberal media so upset, visibly upset, about Donald Trump's victory.
The world's shining light of democracy has gone dark.
You're not having a terrible, terrible dream.
Is there going to be remnants of a neo-fascist movement that he leads in this country after this election?
So does Trump perhaps have a point here? You be the judge, while Reuters talks about cultivating fair and balanced reporting in Trump's America, which this guide sidelined next to Zimbabwe. I'm Miguel Francis Santiago, RT.
A London mosque has won a 2-year fight to have its name removed from an influential terror database. It even got an apology and damages from the organisation responsible. Holly Boyko explains.
Once it's said, it's hard to unsay. Thomson Reuters' WorldCheck database provides terrorist risk assessments for banks, and it listed London's Finsbury Park Mosque as linked to terrorism.
The mosque had been associated with radical cleric Abu Hamza, but 12 years ago, back in 2005, it was taken over by new management who overhauled it and turned its image around. And so for years now, Finsbury Park Mosque has been seen as a symbol of community relations. But it seems that Thomson Reuters, who say that they provide continually updated intelligence and that they are the world's leading source for intelligent information for businesses and professionals, hadn't got the memo. As a result, the mosque says it had its bank accounts closed and sustained reputational damage. So it took Thomson Reuters to court.
We've been affected badly on putting us in that category, the terrorism. First of all, our bank account being closed. We couldn't open any other bank account with any banks except a small bank called Al Rayyan, which we are grateful of. Our reputation being damaged, our credibility being damaged. The community here are really concerned that their mosque is being labeled as a terrorist organization.
I believe in the truth, so if the news agents are publishing something which is lies, they got to be sued for it.
They're going to do it anyhow. It makes no difference. With most of them big companies, they're going to do it. If the newspapers want to print it or the companies want to print it, they've got their outlets because they've all got their favourite journalists that they give their stories to. So it makes no difference what we do. Anyone does, they will put out the false news when they want to, but it's not right.
Finsbury Park Mosque told the court that the WorldCheck database is compiled using open source data. That means Google searches. There are no independent checks and those listed aren't even informed. The mosque has now won a libel payout and an apology from Thomson Reuters.
We have made it clear in the court statements our regret for publishing certain allegations concerning Finsbury Park Mosque. All profiles on WorldCheck are reviewed on an ongoing basis.
With an apology in hand, for this beleaguered mosque, the saga appears to be over. But for Thomson Reuters and its WorldCheck database, it's just the beginning. Lawyers from a number of firms are preparing more libel cases from other businesses and individuals claiming they were wrongly listed on the database. Polly Boyko, RT, London.
Just turning 15:15 here in Moscow. After a very short break, we'll bring you the latest on the sudden escalation of violence in the Ukrainian conflict and reaction from the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
What do you think about sanctions?
Easy right or wrong, but I definitely think sanctions are better than conflict.
You don't perform for diplomatic reasons. You perform for humanitarian ways.
I'm talking obviously about Edward Snowden.
I believe he's a hero. I believe he's coming directly from his heart.
People may have different choice. Maybe they're more interested in having their ego in a product, okay? Say, I make shoes, people identify with a profession, then have higher standards of living, you know, something that fits economic textbooks better, but not their ego.
Thanks for joining us. Turkey's President Erdogan has given Angela Merkel a scolding at a meeting in Ankara after she used the term Islamist when talking about the fight against terrorism.
We talked extensively about fighting Islamist terror and agreed that we want to collaborate closely.
Look, the term Islamist terror seriously upsets us Muslims. That term should not be used. It's not right. Because Islam and terror cannot come together. As a Muslim president, I can never accept such terminology.
The Chancellor later explained that her words do not imply any suspicion regarding Muslims. The tone of the meeting, though, was chilly throughout. In fact, if you take a close look, you'll see the two hardly at any point saw eye to eye.
Biz bunun karşısında durmak durumundayız.
Yeah, we spoke to analyst Ivan Eland about Merkel's visit. He gave her a number of reasons why he thinks the meeting was so chilly.
I think they're trying to repair relationships, and the meeting didn't go very well from what I'm able to perceive. But, you know, Merkel has taken in a lot of refugees, and Turkey is vital to preventing more refugees from coming. And Merkel is in big electoral trouble in Germany because she took so many Syrian and other refugees in. So I think she probably wants to make sure that Turkey is still holding against the refugees coming into Europe. As long as you have the potential for refugees coming into Europe from the Syrian conflict, there's liable to be tensions between all European countries, but particularly Germany, which is the leader, and Turkey. And also, of course, you had this crackdown on the coup by Erdogan. And of course, the Germans and the other Europeans don't really care for that because they're democratic countries.
At least 4 people have been killed as Ukrainian government forces shell residential areas of the city of Donetsk. At least 10 people have been injured. In recent days, the situation has been escalating throughout the Donetsk region, with Kiev's troops saying they're only retaliating to aggression from anti-government forces. Murat Gazdiev shed some light.
It hasn't been this bad in over a year. Ukrainian tanks, artillery and heavy weapons are back on the front lines, dueling to the death with anti-government forces. Thousands have either fled their homes or been evacuated, like these civilians.
It is literally so dangerous, the shelling so intense, the people in the more dangerous parts of the city where the shelling is fiercest are being evacuated from their homes in armored personnel carriers because it is unsafe to leave by foot or by car.
The situation is bad in the village. The day before yesterday, 2 houses burnt down and 1 woman died. Shootings keep happening. We didn't leave earlier because we hoped that everything would get better.
I don't understand why it all started again. Early it was okay, but from Friday the situation became worse. The gunfire is very loud. We are always on edge.
Most of these refugees didn't want to speak on camera. This is normal in East Ukraine. They fear persecution, repercussions at the hands of the Ukrainian government.
It's this district, this neighborhood, that has borne the brunt of Ukrainian shelling over the last few days, and every few seconds we're hearing explosions. There's also small arms fire. Still, there are people left here without power, without water, without heating in this freezing weather, refusing to leave their homes.
It is truly like a city of the dead. Only the most desperate and hopeless stayed behind.
Our lives started during World War II. We thought we'd end our lives in peaceful times, but it didn't happen. Our own people are fighting each other. How is that possible?
As we searched for other holdouts, an all too familiar sound pierced the air. The scream of rocket artillery. We left quickly, giving a lift to a young couple we saw running through the streets. There was nothing else to see. Civil war is back on. Morad Gazdiev, RT, in Donetsk, Ukraine.
Elsewhere, the town of Avdiivka has suffered severe shelling in the past few days, resulting in a number of soldier and civilian deaths. UNICEF reported that over 17,000 people were suddenly left without power or water. In fact, the area around Avdiivka is part of what's known as the contact line, marking a 50-kilometer buffer zone. The Russian Foreign Ministry this afternoon claiming that using heavy weapons there is a direct violation of the Minsk peace agreement. In fact, a BBC war correspondent filmed the following tanks, posting the video on his Twitter account. He says these tanks do belong to Kiev. And during a UN Security Council special meeting, an OSCE monitor in Ukraine confirmed that tanks, along with other types of heavy weapons, have been seen near Avdiivka.
The highest number of explosions yet recorded by the mission. Most of these were recorded in the area of Avdiivka and Yasnovata. In particular, the use of multiple launch rocket systems, Grads, mortars and artillery is cause for added concern. The use of tanks has also been observed.
However, during the UN meeting, Ukraine's ambassador said the only aim of Kiev's sudden military offensive is to bring peace.
We are seeking peace and doing our utmost to take every step to bring it back to Ukraine. Destroying critical infrastructure and thus creating humanitarian disaster is a terrorist tactic aimed primarily at civilians. This tactic is not new for the Russian forces. Russia and its proxies in Donbass continue to block and undermine the peaceful process.
The Ukrainian ambassador's comments were met with harsh words from Russia's envoy to the UN. Vitaly Churkin said that Kiev is on, quote, a war path and is trying to completely undermine the Minsk peace agreements. The coordinator of the anti-war Answer Coalition, Brian Becker, told us that Kiev's prepared to sustain collateral damage in order to push forward its political goals.
The government in Ukraine, the government in Kiev, is using military means, including the cost of many lives, both those who are killed, those who are injured, those who are dislocated, not to win, not to carry out a military victory. That's not achievable. but in order to position itself diplomatically and politically. As the new administration in Washington comes into power and has to recalibrate U.S. foreign policy towards Russia, which means most of all recalibrating U.S. policy towards Ukraine.
The governor of Okinawa, Japan, has visited Washington to discuss the relocation of a U.S. airbase on its territory. A Guyane Chichikan spoke to him at a news conference.
The governor of Okinawa is trying to get the U.S. to withdraw its forces from the island, which hosts over 70% of U.S. troops stationed in Japan, or roughly 30,000 service members. The majority of the island's population wants the Americans to leave, but Tokyo has a security agreement with Washington by which they can stay. The Okinawa governor says he supports the agreement, but still wants the troops to leave, at least half of them. At a news conference, I asked him why.
I think that all Japanese citizens should think about the Japan-US security arrangements. US military bases occupy 0.6% of the whole of Japan, and 70% of those US military bases are in places where the population density is about the same as Tokyo. I don't like it anymore. You're telling me that the security system is important, but why am I against the Okinawa base? I think that you would understand if you kept 70% of your bases at your place. There have been many jet crashes and sexual assaults against girls after World War II.
People in Okinawa have protested against U.S. bases on the island for years, especially in the wake of crimes involving U.S. service members. Cases of rape have especially angered the local population. Under Okinawa's previous governor, the Obama administration agreed to relocate the base to a less populated area of the island. But the locals and the current governor object to the relocation as well, because he says it would destroy the environment of the bay where they want to build it. President Trump may not care about the environment of that bay, but on the campaign trail, he said he wanted countries to pay for U.S. presence and protection, which in the case of Japan and Okinawa may be unlikely. That gave Okinawa officials some hope.
Mr. Trump says if Japan doesn't pay more, then he's going to withdraw the troops from Japan. As far as Okinawa people are concerned, that's fine. If that's what he says, he would welcome that.
It is unclear at this time where President Trump stands on the issue. The new Defense Secretary, James Mattis, is heading to Japan. His views on the issue also unclear.
Well, Japan spends an estimated $1.5 billion a year just to maintain the base. According to the Pentagon, though, in total, Washington itself spent about $5.5 billion on all its Japanese bases just last year. Up next, boom bust.